Dear brothers and sisters, you are probably aware of the saying, love begets love. If you want to receive love, then give love. And part of loving is giving. And so we can also say that giving begets giving. Generosity begets generosity. And this is proven to us by our readings this Sunday. In our first reading today, we heard the story of the prophet Elisha, an itinerant prophet, a prophet who moves from one town to another. And usually he will pass by the town of Shunem. And in Shunem, a woman would usually welcome him in her home, prepare food for him, and would allow him to stay there, to sleep there. Kaya tuwing dadaan si Prophet Elisha sa Shunem, doon siya tumitira sa bahay ng babaeng ito. At nung napapansin na nung babae na nadadalas yata ang pagdaan dito, sa halip na mainis, siguro kung sa atin yun, may iba pang bahay na pwede siyang tuluyan, hindi lang dito sa bahay natin. Pero sabi niya sa kanyang asawa, palaging dumadaan dito si Prophet Elisha. Ipag-reserve na natin ng kwarto. Ayusin natin yung kwarto niya para anytime na dumaan siya, may matutuluyan siya. The generosity of allotting a space in her home for the prophet of God. And because of her generosity, the prophet Elisha asked the servant of that woman, "Can something be done for her?" And when the prophet Elisha learned that she does not have a son, the prophet Elisha told the woman, "This time next year, you will be fondling a baby son." Just imagine, because of that little room given to the prophet of God, she was given a son. Her generosity to the prophet Elisha begets the generosity of God. How through the words of Jesus in our gospel today, whoever receives a prophet because he is a prophet will receive a prophet's reward. We have seen this in the life and experience of the woman of Shunem. In our second reading today, St. Paul talks about the generosity of Jesus, who gave his whole life for our salvation. And because of the generosity of Jesus, St. Paul says, he was rewarded by God the Father. He was given the resurrection. And so, Christ was raised from the dead, and he dies no more. Death no longer has power over him. That was what Jesus gained because of his generosity, because of his offering of his whole life. Generosity begets generosity. Our readings today prove to us that if you are generous to God, God will be all the more generous to you. But my dear brothers and sisters, let us not think that generosity begins with us. Huwag nating isipin na para maging generous ang Diyos, ako muna ang magiging generous. The truth is, generosity does not begin with us. Generosity begins with God. Generosity begins with the generous God. And when we are aware, when we become aware how generous God has been, then we are inspired to be generous. Ang Diyos ang unang nagiging mapagbigay sa atin. At tayo naman, kapag nakita natin yung kagandahang loob ng Diyos sa atin, tumutugon tayo sa Kanyang kagandahang loob sa pamamagitan din ng kagandahang loob sa Kanya at sa ating kapwa. That is the cycle of generosity. It begins with a generous God. And because He has been so good to us, we are inspired by His generosity. And so we respond to His generosity by our generosity to Him and to our neighbors. And when we become generous to God and to our neighbors, God takes notice of that. And God, who cannot be outdone in generosity, will be generous to us all the more. The cycle of generosity. Hindi natin madadaig ang Diyos sa kabutihang loob. Magbibigay siya sa atin ng mga biyaya. Tutugon tayo sa pamamagitan ng ating maliit na kakayanan ng pagbibigay. At kapag nakita ng Diyos yung ating taus-pusong pagbibigay, tutugon din siya ng higit pa sa ating naibigay. Generosity begets generosity. I'm sure, my dear brothers and sisters, that you have your own stories and experiences on how God has been generous to you. Siguro marami tayong maikukwento na totoo nga, kapag nagbigay ka, ang Diyos magbibigay din ng higit pa sa iyong ibinigay. Maraming tayong kwento na naranasan natin yung kabutihan ng Diyos. At dahil ang buti-buti ng Diyos sa atin, parang hindi natin maatim na hindi rin maging mabuti sa ating kapwa. Please recall those many beautiful stories of God's generosity, our generosity, and God who rewards us because of our generosity. You know, my dear brothers and sisters, our chapel has a very special mission in the Archdiocese of Manila. Our chapel, I admit, is very blessed with material resources na nanggagaling po sa inyo. And because of your donations, because of what you offer to God and to the church, we are able to help many churches, many parishes, many dioceses, many institutions. At madalas po, si Cardinal Advincula mismo magpapadala sa akin ng mga sulat. Sasabihin niya, "O Regie, baka pwedeng landmark ang tumulong dito sa humihingi ng tulong." Siyempre, kapag galing sa kanya, hindi na ako makatanggi. Di bali sana kung walang amount na ilalagay, nasa sa akin na ang pagdedetermine ng amount. Pero kapag nakalagay na kung magkano ang ibibigay, parang napapalunok na lang ako. No choice but to obey. One day, when I arrived here at the chapel, I found many letters on my table. And when I started reading the letter one after another, puro humihingi. At may mga nakalagay pa minsan si Cardinal, "Oh, ganitong ibibigay, ganitong ibibigay." When I started computing, I have to release almost 200,000 pesos to help these churches, dioceses, and institutions. And so I was sitting quietly in front of on my table, and I was thinking, will I give all of this? Baka pwedeng humingi naman sila sa green belt. Baka mas mayaman ng green belt. And one of our staff entered and saw me, nung nakatulala lang ako sa office. Sabi sa akin, "Father, anong problema?" Sabi ko, "Ang daming humihingi." And he said to me, okay na yan, Father. Ibabalik yan ng Diyos. Nahiya naman ako. Kaya sabi ko, okay, prepare the checks. And I signed the checks. And then I started to do other works. I celebrated Mass. And at the end of the day, that same staff of our chapel told me, Father, bumalik na ang binigay mo kanina. Sobra-sobra pa sa binigay mo. And I could just say, oh, how generous God is. Kaya po dito sa ating chapel, lalong-lalo na yung mga nandito na before the pandemic, you are well aware of the Regie program of our chapel. Grace, generous, gratitude, generous. Once we become aware of God's grace, of how generous God has been to us, then we are moved to gratitude by our own generosity. And because of this, we are able to help many. And they are very grateful to all of you for all the help that you are giving them through our chapel. And when God takes notice of our generosity, He will continue to bless us. Kaya, huwag tayong magdadamot sa Diyos. Kasi kahit kailan, hindi nagdamot ang Diyos sa atin. Huwag nating kukuriputin ang Diyos. And I'm not talking only of money, but even of our time, of our attention, of our love. Huwag tayong kuripot sa Diyos. Dahil kahit kailan, hindi naging kuripot ang Diyos sa atin. At kung akala natin na tayo'y generous na, hindi natin madadaig ang Diyos sa Kanyang generosity. Just be generous. And God will be all the more generous to you. Ganun din po sa ating relationship sa isa't isa. If generosity begets generosity, then let us be generous to each other, and our neighbors will also be generous to us. Kapag nagtataka kayo, bakit kaya ang kuripot niya sa akin? Bakit kaya palagi akong tinitipid? Bakit kaya konting budget lang ang binibigay sa akin? Start to be generous first. And the other person will surely be inspired by your generosity. And the response will also be generosity. My dear brothers and sisters, God has been very good, very generous to you. Be generous to others too.